Welcome to Reimagining Anti-Violence Work, a small space where we're going to unpack the big issues currently impacting the anti-violence field and collectively dream up a new future. Hello, anti-violence workers, leaders, and anyone else that's made their way here. I'm your host, Steph Klotz, a former anti-violence worker and a member of the We Deserve Better project. Today, I'm joined by Dee, Joy, and Juli, who are all members of the We Deserve Better project mutual aid group. Dee is an advocate for survivors of gender-based violence and has spent the last 10 years in the movement to end GBV. She got her start at her local domestic and sexual violence program, providing support to victims and survivors in her community. Dee holds a bachelor degree in global studies with a focus on Latin American history and culture from Penn State University. A descendant of the Caribbean diaspora, Dee spent her youth in Brooklyn, New York, and is a proud daughter of immigrant parents from the Dominican Republic. Dee has 2 cats, loves to cross-stitch in her spare time, and makes a mean tres leches. Joy Ingram is a community empowerment facilitator striving to promote healing and wholeness for those who have been beat up by life, especially Black women. A staunch advocate of self-awareness and love, she is constantly crusading to help people plant love and grow joy in all aspects of their lives. When not working, she's probably on the beach somewhere sipping coffee or wine and reading a good book. Juli is a radical social worker with 15 years of experience working in the anti-violence field with a focus on human trafficking. She started her career working in fundraising and development at a small nonprofit. Upon finishing her master's degree in social work at Fordham University Graduate School of Social Service, she worked in direct services with survivors of human trafficking in New York City. Before leaving the anti-violence field, Juli worked in curriculum development, training and education on trauma and resilience, and supporting crisis workers in workplace wellness and secondary trauma. Juli is fueled by community care and liberation. My goodness, what a group of guests I have with me today. I am so excited for each and every one of you to be here with me. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So you all are part of that We Deserve Better mutual aid group. And, I'll be honest, I had no idea what mutual aid was when that part of the We Deserve Better project was developed. And so I imagine that maybe some of our listeners also aren't familiar. And so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about what mutual aid is and maybe how it differs from charity.
I can start and Joy and Julie jump in. I think the name itself kind of gives away a little bit of what mutual aid means and how it's different from charity. So mutual aid is collaborative, reciprocal aid that happens in community. I think the difference between charity is that it's a two-way sort of thing versus where charity is kind of one way. I think the big sort of like tagline that I hear a lot is solidarity, not charity. And I think that kind of highlights that kind of two-way, like you're in community together, you're not, I think with charity, there's like gatekeeping that happens, right? Or like there may be hoops that you have to jump through to maybe get that charity or that aid. Whereas with mutual aid, it's like, I'm giving this to you, or, well, I shouldn't say I'm giving this to you. I just think about certain instances where I've given aid to people and like, I'm not like asking for proof or a receipt or anything like that. It's just like, here, this is your money. You can do whatever you want with it. I don't need to know, what you do with it, even if you're maybe fundraising for like your medical care. Like once it's yours, it's yours. It doesn't matter to me where it ends up.
I think of mutual aid as caring for our neighbors, like really thinking about how do we care and love our neighbors, whether or not they are actually a part of our friend groups. I think there is a a misconception that community care is isolated to like the people that you know, whether it's your friends or your family or whatnot. And mutual aid actually dispels that myth a bit by showing us that like we can care for our neighbors and love our neighbors as our community members, right? And so that might be that you're not necessarily helping a friend. They may be a friend, right? There are those spaces where your friend may be receiving mutual aid from you, but they might not necessarily, right? So one of the things that I think about, for example, is my next door neighbor. He and his wife are older adults, and we will go back and forth in sharing meals, and we'll just drop off meals at each other's houses. And that is one thing, where if they made a big pot of soup, they'll bring us a big Tupperware of soup, right? And if I'm making vodka sauce, for example, and pasta, I might drop off like a little meal kit to them. And so it's really, just caring for your neighbors as, people that we love and respect, right? The way we would anyone in our personal lives.
I love that. And I agree with both of you, Dee and Julie, that mutual aid isn't charity, and it is about helping not just folks who are necessarily members of your particular circle, your inner circle. So I became a member of a local mutual aid group back during COVID. They had one on Facebook where it was just people in the group in our local town who would, come on the group and say that they had something that they could offer if someone was in need, or that they had a need and they were trying to see if someone could help. And it was interesting to me because a lot of times there were things that I realized I could help with that I hadn't even thought about. And there were other times where there was a need that I probably wouldn't have known about had it not been posted in the group. And even if I couldn't help personally, I might have known someone who could. And I think that mutual aid is about us helping each other out whenever and however we can. And I also feel like it's about paying it forward because that's a thing as well. And that's one of the reasons why, I don't have a problem with giving to someone I don't know personally, because I feel like structures have been put in place, people have been put in my life, and help has been given to me that I can never give back to other people. So I feel it's my duty to pay that assistance forward in whatever way that I can.
Mm. Yeah. And I think there's, in that part, I think, when we think about mutual aid, also, we think of it as reciprocal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be reciprocal from the same person that you're helping, right? So, like, to that point of like thinking about, we hope that we're a part of a community where if we have a need that can be met, and if we have an offering, that we can give it, right? Without this expectation. Dee, you mentioned, without expecting receipts, right? Without expecting that this person is going to prove to you that your aid was worthy, that they were worthy of your aid, right? So, in part, like we think about it, yes, it's reciprocal, but reciprocal within community, so not necessarily one for one. Like I'm giving to you with the expectation that you'll return the favor to me or that you'll directly give back to me.
Yeah, instead of a tit for tat kind of thing, or, these checks and balances, just a network of humans. And before we started recording, I was saying to Joy, right, humans contain multitudes, right? We're multifaceted. And so all these ways that I'm multifaceted, maybe something that you need. And I really resonated with when Joy said there were things that people needed that didn't even like dawn on you, right? Because you've got that covered. It's not something that you like think about as a need and could so easily give it, right? Knowledge or expertise or whatever it is. And that's just such a powerful way to think about it, right? I love thinking about the really multifaceted way that people exist in this world. And so it's just another way that kind of clicks together. So cool. So what are some of the things that you all have cooking up for the community of We Deserve Better people out here in the world, the anti-violence workers through the We Deserve Better project?
Yeah, we're really excited because we'll be kicking off in July with Joy hosting a fabulous workshop on financial literacy for advocates.
Yes, I'm so excited about that because it's a thing that's been on my heart for a while. Just how, like, I know a lot of us, number one, working in the anti-violence field, we're not making a lot of money. You don't get the penthouse apartment and the luxury vehicle doing anti-violence work. That's just not how it works. But we should be able to make a decent living. We should be able to pay our bills. But in addition to having the money, we have to be able to know how to use the money as well. We have to be able to understand how money works, how finance works. And that's something that I didn't really get a good grip on until I was in my 40s. And so now it's like I know that there are a lot of other advocates out there who are my age. I know that there are a lot of younger advocates out there, and I want to pass the information on to them so that they'll be able to do all the things without having to possibly go through a bankruptcy or get turned down for an apartment or have a super duper stupid high interest rate when they want to go and purchase a car or anything like that. I want to get the information out there to them so that folks will understand how money works so that they don't have to hit all the pitfalls that I hit along the way. Or if they've hit the pitfalls already, know that there is, there you can overcome these things and you can do better in the future. And being financially strapped isn't something that has to be a lifelong thing.
Yeah, it's so essential because I think, when we think about how to get our basic needs met, I mean, that is a part of it, right? When we think about financial literacy, to Joy's point, advocates are not making a ton of money. And, and where we do make money, we got to make it stretch, right? Like we are constantly in that space where, advocates deserve so much more. And so when we dream up, mutual aid, part of that is sharing our knowledge, and Joy is was kind enough to share her expertise with the rest of the group. So we're excited to host these workshops for We Deserve Better project. And so Joy will be doing a series on financial literacy and just sharing her wealth of knowledge. And we hope to do other types of workshops. And we encourage folks too that if you have expertise, please join us. Please host a workshop. Please, contribute the knowledge that you have to support other advocates. That's the mutual aid that we're seeking. And so that's something that you can see coming down the pipeline from us, as well as we'll be moving the Talk It Out Together spaces under the mutual aid umbrella. So a lot of folks know the Talk It Out Together space really well. And so we'll be bringing that back a bit in a bit of a revamped way, right? So we're a little under construction right now, but we're really excited to bring that back.
That's awesome. We don't need to be done with construction before we start moving forward. Mm-hmm. Social workers are I think, inventors of building the plane while we're flying it. So I think it makes very much sense that we are moving forward and sharing Joy's amazing knowledge with folks. And while we have that talking space kind of in the works again. You mentioned folks reaching out if they have a way to support. Should folks reach out if they have like a need, something that they think is like a thing that a lot of advocates need, that maybe we can find someone to support in that way?
Yeah, please reach out to us if there's some, especially we have a bunch of folks involved with We Deserve Better project, but we don't always know everything, right? Or know all the needs, because things look different for people depending on where they are geographically or for other reasons. So yeah, if there's something that either you have to offer or you think that we haven't addressed so far or addressed sufficiently, we want to hear about it. Like, we love feedback. It makes us better. And I think also just thinking about how we're all in this work and doing this work, depending on like your entry point into the work or how long you've been doing it, your experience is going to look different. So like for me, right, I'm someone, it's been like 10 years, right, doing this work. That's going to look different than someone who started like a year ago or 2 years ago, or someone who's been in the work for 30 years or 20 years. That experience, it's something I think about a lot, of like how things are different. I think about it a lot in terms of like how or why there's conflict between people or different generations in the work, which is a whole nother conversation that we're not going to get into right now because we're focused on this. But yeah, want to hear anybody's thoughts or feedback, and you can always reach out to us through Instagram, but you can also reach out at wedeservebetter.work/get involved. You can email us through there or submit feedback. However you feel is best to send that to us, please reach out. Or if you know one of us personally and you're like, I thought about this thing, what do you think?
Yeah. I love, the thought of folks reaching out. I think that's what we're here for, right? As an organization overall, is to hear feedback, right? That was how We Deserve Better project started, was really thinking about feedback from advocates and hearing about the real world experiences that advocates were having in the field, but also in their lives. So, the other thing that I think about is also if we can advance any kind of, whether it's a GoFundMe or, a social media request, or, if you have like a need for mutual aid that we can push out to, that's something we've also been exploring of how can we support folks in that avenue of, I know certainly we can't do it all, but but we'll certainly try, right? Like we will always try to do our best to support our communities. And and also like if it's even something like emotional support, bring it to the Talk It Out Together space. If it's like emotional support that we can provide, right? Join the group. We have, and we're always recruiting members, and we have enrollment in March and September of each year. Join our crew, right? If you have an idea, if you have, submit an application and just, join our crew. That's also a great way to get involved and to share your gifts and to also then receive as well.
Awesome. I think that's so important, right? It was kind of like a trick question because I knew you all were open to feedback, but I think it's so important for folks to know that asking for help is okay. And it's really hard to ask for help, but that's really what we're kind of seeking at this time. Like, what are the things that people need? And, what are the ways that we can, maybe not me, Steph, right? But in our network of all the people that really care about this work, what are the ways that we can meet those needs? So I am very happy to hear that y'all are open to that kind of feedback and that information. So what do you think makes mutual aid so important for anti-violence workers and maybe for all of us, right, in this world? Wondering what your thoughts are on that. How come it's so important?
Ooh, I have thoughts. I have so many thoughts. I can start. Well, I think one of the first things I think about is the COVID pandemic. I think mutual aid kind of like grew during that time, or it became more well known because I think we realized that our systems maybe weren't always set up to support everybody. So we started creating our own support networks. And to Joy's point of like, we don't make a lot of money doing this work, which I think is another reason why mutual aid is important and is becoming increasingly important, because I can't tell you how many advocates that I've talked to or have heard from, myself included, that are like, I need to leave this job for whatever reason, right? There's lots of reasons why people want to leave, whether it's a toxic work environment, they're burnt out, whatever. And you can't, because you just don't have that financial, backup or support to be able to do that. So you kind of just end up having to stay there until you find something else. That happened to a colleague of ours at my last job, where she was getting bullied and isolated by leadership. And we started a GoFundMe for them because we anticipated that they were going to get fired. And we didn't want them to we wanted them to have like a soft landing while, if that were to happen. Thankfully, they were able to get another job and they were okay. But if they hadn't, what would have happened? Where do people end up when they are not able to, especially now? I think it's becoming increasingly important now. The job market is really bad right now. People are having a really hard time finding a job, right? I know I've been looking for a year and a half myself, and other people, I've heard lots of people say I've been looking for 6 months, a year and a half. And, unemployment only goes on for so long, right? If you happen to get laid off, which is another thing we're seeing a lot. A lot of people are getting laid off. So I think the need is increasing and will continue to increase under the current conditions with this administration, as they continue to gut the funding that supports anti-violence work. So I think we're at a critical point where it's good that we're creating this, because I hate that it's a necessary thing, but I'm glad that it's happening, because I think it will continue to be a need as things go on. I don't know if y'all have other thoughts to add.
Always. Always other thoughts to add. I really think, mutual aid, there's so many different needs that folks have, right? And nobody understands advocates better than advocates. It's, our lived experience ties us together. And so, when I think about mutual aid, it's, it's just being human. And so for some of us, it might be that we need connection. During the pandemic, like Dee said, so beyond just the essentials of basic necessities, people were isolated, right? So when we're doing the work, such difficult work, there's still so many organizations that are working remotely. There are some organizations that are going back to in-person work, and that might be a challenge for some folks, right? Is the decision to go back to in-person work, particularly if you have a disability or a chronic illness, that might be barriers. But when we think about some of those things, to your point, Dee and Joy, having a soft landing space for folks, whether emotionally, physically, through basic essentials, whatever that is, I think we all need that as humans, right? Is just to have community and to know that, that our needs can be met. Dee, to your point, if the government is and the systems are not working in our favor, unfortunately, it's up to us to then fill those gaps, right? And no one knows that better than anti-violence advocates, is filling those gaps, right? And, needing to fill the gaps in the system that aren't working. We know the system was not designed for us. We know that, as people of color, as, as folks who've experienced marginalization and racism and all, I think we all know the system was not designed for us. And so it's kind of back up to us to, you know, to really support each other. So I think everyone needs that.
Absolutely. I think mutual aid is good for us because it allows us to help each other in ways that we can without the barriers and the red tape of working within systems. You know, because it's one thing, like I learned when I was working in advocacy, is that there were things we wanted to do for clients at times, and it's just like, oh, our grants say that we can't do that. You know, but with mutual, and that was one of the most frustrating things for me, is that we're here to help, but we've got funding that has restrictions that say we can't help in certain ways. But with mutual aid, we can help however we want to help, however the help is needed. You know, the grant funding says that volunteers can't drive people to a doctor's appointment. With mutual aid, whoever's got a car and the availability can drive someone to a doctor's appointment or to a bus station or an airport when they're trying to flee violence and get back home to loving family. We can do these things. We can buy them clothes. We can buy them food. We don't have to check all these boxes and wait for things to be approved and all those things. We can just do it. And a lot of us have skills that maybe we're not necessarily using on our jobs, but that can come in handy in doing mutual aid work. We have passions that can come through when doing mutual aid work that maybe we don't get to show off when doing other work. So I think it's helpful. Oftentimes it's helpful to us for us to help each other.
For sure.
It also has me thinking, like, as you all were talking, like, this is how communities worked before everything was like so expanded and interconnected. Like, people just took care of the people in their community. And as a white woman, I will say, I think white people have a much harder time with it and are less keen to caring for their communities than other groups of individuals. Just even recently, when I broke my foot, I live in a Latino community, and neighbors doing these things like, what can we do for you? Can we take your dog for a walk? How can we assist? Right? Just because they're part of my community. And that's not something that I would see outside my friend group, right? In a white community. And the other thing I was thinking about is that, especially with Talk It Out Together becoming part of the mutual aid that you're describing, that space for me really speaks to the really specific kind of trauma and experience that workers in the anti-violence movement are feeling, right? That moral injury, we were just talking about grief and guilt and gratitude. And, you know, I felt a lot of those things that I was processing after I left my org, even in one-on-one therapy setting that I was like privileged and fortunate enough to have access to, didn't address some of the things that I was able to talk about and feel in those spaces with other workers that had had a similar experience. And so it just is so, I don't know, the idea of like what I think Joy said at the very beginning, like, who knows better what anti-violence workers need than anti-violence workers, or maybe it was D, I can't remember now, but that idea of like, we all kind of understand the frustration of that red tape and the way that it interferes with the things that people need and what is the right thing to do. When you were talking about that, I also I teach like an ethics course for anti-violence work, and one of the things that comes up is that like the ethical thing and the legal thing aren't necessarily the same. And when you were talking about like, this person can't drive somebody to the airport, like the person's like, this person needs to go. They need to get on that plane. And the ethical thing is to get them a ride there. And that oftentimes, like, the way that our systems operate kind of take a little bit of that, like, ethical compass out of it, and it becomes about that red tape. So I kind of like fireworks going off in my brain about just like really the power of mutual aid just all across the community, that it's kind of blessing.
Mhm. What I was gonna say to bounce off of that, your first thought too, of like, that other communities do it better than like the white communities, because I think about that and I'm like, when we think about charity, right? Like the mothers of charity that, like, who came up with that structure of like nonprofits, and we see so many times that leaders of nonprofits are white people, right? White women, white men, and, those are the folks who are, determining who gets the services, who gets the financial aid, who gets, right, and like, and even within systems, if we're thinking politically, and who distributes the funding. And when we think about communities of color, like, we've had to rely on mutual aid for centuries, like, right, like we've had to rely on each other, on our direct community, our direct bubbles, our villages, our tribes, our whatever it is. And I think about that, and like, we would be remiss to not acknowledge those communities where mutual aid came from. And even thinking about like the history of mutual aid, like the Black Panther Party, and the free breakfast programs, and like all of those things that, like, that made this, that this structure. I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that too, that we would be nowhere without communities of color, right? With their leadership in this, without Indigenous practices, when I think about healing circles, and like the ways people practice before, or outside of capitalism, right? Like now we see it as like therapy, but therapy is an exchange, right? So like before that, there were Indigenous healing circles. There were, relying on your family and your direct community and your, so on and so forth. So I just think that's like a really, really important part to like mention here, is that, communities of color have done this for generations, and we can't not acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I think, Julie, when you mentioned that, I think basically when we talk about mutual aid, we're talking about the village. We're talking about people helping each other. And I think the thing with charity is that charity should have been like mutual aid, but I think it came from the idea of people who had more doing a favor for people who had less. And I think that's one of the biggest things, and one of the biggest issues with the idea of charity, because it's just, we should just be doing for each other. We should just be helping each other. We should be loving our neighbors as ourselves. And that's the thing. If I'm going to feed me and I've got enough food, then I'm going to feed you. Whether you've got food or not, you're going to get fed. And it's not a thing of, oh, you don't have any food, so I'm going to do this great big nice gesture and feed you. It's no, we're both hungry, let's eat. I can remember being in my 20s, and like me and one of my best friends, we'd be broke half the time. But if one of us ate, the other person ate. Even if I only had $5, if she only had $5, then each one of us was going to get $2.50 worth of food. And that was the way it was going to be. And it was never a thing of anybody looking down on anybody else or nothing like that. We just helped each other. And I feel like if, as people in general, we did more of that, and stop trying to judge people based on what we have versus what we don't have, how we look, what we can do, all the things, then the world would just be that much of a better place.
Yeah. It's just like bringing me back to that colonialist mindset, right? The origin of power over, right? That this that there has to be someone that's better than and somebody that's less than. And like, our individualistic, you should be able to pick yourself up by the bootstraps, even though those bootstraps are strapped to your like grandfather's, $1 million, whatever. And so I think how do we extract that power over lens from like everything in this world? And then it reminds me of what Juli's saying, that the answer is mutual aid, right? It's what Joy said, seeing everybody as equals, and really the indigenous practices, the way really groups interacted before colonization, right? And some of the ways that communities supported each other before that. So I'm probably not alone in just loving the idea of providing support for each other in this way, a community that really truly cares for each other, but maybe at the same time don't know how to get started. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for folks that are interested in organizing a mutual aid group of their own in their own community.
Start with your neighbor. Build relationships, right? Like that's what it comes down to, is like the relational aspect of it. Like certainly you don't have to be in relationship with someone to help, but also building relationships is where you can start, right? Like, start with your neighbor, and if you have extra and it that you're making, drop off a plate, right? Or, ask, I think to that, and I'm like, start small, start with your immediate proximity, even getting to know your neighbors, like, so that when they do have a need, it doesn't feel awkward, or when you have a need, it doesn't feel awkward, right? Like, get to know your neighbors. We learned that during the pandemic, and right, like what you were sharing about, like the pandemic taught us so much about mutual aid and in our direct communities. And I think there is nothing better than growing relationships with your neighbors as a place to start.
Absolutely. I think getting to know people and just having a conversation. Just have a conversation with someone, and you never know what can come out of just a basic conversation and letting folks know, just talking about things. I remember there's a cidery here in town that I frequent, and usually I go down on like Wednesday nights, and a lot of times you'll see the same folks there on Wednesday nights. And so there was a woman I was having a conversation with one night, and we started talking about menopause. And I think I was complaining about some of the symptoms and stuff that I didn't know that was related to menopause, that why is this a thing? And because I was having a rough time, a really rough time. Well, come to find out, she works in healthcare. She works in women's health. And she was able to just share a bunch of resources with me about things I could do to help myself. I, in turn, can pass those things along to other women who are going through these things. That's a form of mutual aid. And it all happened, over some cider at the local cidery while we were just hanging out, having a good time. And so these are things, but if I wanted to have like a more formalized group, this is a person I could reach out to because I know she can help with women's healthcare issues, things like that. So just having a conversation, starting a conversation, and keeping folks in mind with the resources that they can provide.
In addition to what Juli and Joy have shared, and getting to know your neighbors, which is always a great first step. If you're like, I want to do more than that, you could. You don't have to start big. You can start small. But if you want to do something that's on a bigger scale, you can always see if there's a mutual aid, group in your community. I bring this up because in preparing for this podcast, I was like, oh, where's that book that I want to mention that I'm going to mention in like 2 minutes? And I I learned that there's a mutual aid society in our county. It's relatively new, but I was like, I didn't know about this. And partly because I'm not on social media, it was like on Facebook. I was like, I don't have Facebook, so I wouldn't have known. But I'm like, oh, now I can go see what's going on with that and see, what they're doing because, I talk to my neighbors, but sometimes, I wish that there was something that maybe I could help even more people than just the folks in my neighborhood. So that's a good place to start. I think another thing is doing some reading. A lot of folks have probably heard about this book, Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next, by Dean Spade, is a good one. And if you are like, I don't want to get a book right now or read a book, you could. He also has a podcast and a Patreon, which is free. And there's like lots of good stuff in there and videos and all sorts of things. So like you can kind of start small and learning there because I think it can be overwhelming the amount of information that's out there. I'm sure there's lots of other resources, but that's one of the ones that I think about just because I engage with his work a lot. So, yeah.
I want to piggyback off of that because I think one of the things in educating ourselves too about, mutual aid is also dispelling our biases, right? And understanding our biases. I think that is really critical work to mutual aid is understanding where our biases lie. And because everyone has them, right? It's not necessarily that like you're bad for having biases. Everyone has biases, but also how are we expected to practice mutual aid if we're coming from a judgmental space, right? Like we know that those are some of the biggest flaws with charity is the judgment, who accesses it, who does, like who needs it, who, all of those things. Yeah. And like the hierarchy that exists, right? And how patronizing that is. But with mutual aid, we have an opportunity to learn about, what we think our biases are. What are some challenges? How do we approach, the work of mutual aid with non-judgment, right? That like we're not handing something out, but rather we're supporting our community, supporting our neighbors, supporting people that we care about, just as humans, right? Whether or not we're in relationship with them, again, like it's just as humans that we care for other humans, right? So I just think that's really, really important too in like educating ourselves is like, yes, absolutely on like educating ourselves on like mutual aid models and whatnot. But we also have some like internal work to do as well when we're exploring how we want to engage with mutual aid.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Julie. I think when I have been doing a lot of work, again, a white woman here, have to unlearn and relearn a lot of things and be constantly kind of reflecting and processing. And so I think something I shout from the rooftops, and I talk about this with like leadership and changes in your organization. It isn't, you said it, it's not if. It's not, oh, do I have? Yes. Yes, you do. And so everybody does. So there's no need to feel shame because then you could say, well, what are the things that show up for me? Where are my biases? Where is this happening? I don't need to feel shame about it because look at me, I'm a boss because I'm doing something about it. I'm addressing it. That takes a lot more gusto than pretending it doesn't exist. So I think I really love that idea of because it is so much internal work. And I've been in a lot of spaces throughout my life with people judging about who receives what kind of care, both inside and outside of anti-violence organizations. And that solidarity, not charity mindset, I think is a great way to reframe it, as well as doing that internal work. Any last thoughts from you all before we wrap up this incredible conversation that we've been having so far today?
Just so much gratitude. Thanks for giving us the space, Steph, and for hosting us. It's been a great conversation, and I'm just so grateful to be in community with you all.
I am so incredibly grateful for having you all in my community, and for the community of the We Deserve Better project that really helped save me post leaving my anti-violence work, and all the ways that I felt community there have really been a lifeboat in all of this. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you all so much for joining me today and for sharing about all the ways that communities can mutually care and support each other. I know I'm excited about some of the opportunities coming up from the We Deserve Better Project mutual aid group, especially Joy's financial literacy workshop. I could use a little tuning up in that area.
July 28th. July 28th.
July 28th, people. We are going to put the links for that and for all the books and some of the other things that we mentioned in the show notes, so that you all can be inspired and keep clicking to see, how you want to join with us next. But I hope that all of you out there listening learn something, or maybe are even inspired to get involved in mutual aid in your own community. If you or someone you know is interested in joining the We Deserve Better project, or in being a guest on the podcast, check out the show notes for details on how to connect. Thanks for listening. Remember, anti-violence work is neither anti-violent nor working to end violence. So keep talking and reimagining amongst yourselves.